David Mullins belongs in the Hall of Shame, not the ETSU Hall of Fame. Hi everybody, I'm Marky Billson, and with the Buccaneers, an off day due to the Chinese virus today. They were scheduled to play a improving Virginia military team at home, but the game looks like postponed, and the Bucs are off for a week. Saturday's game is also off the slate. So I thought I'd tie up some loose ends here. Over Christmas time, a little bit before Christmas, ETSU announced a new Hall of Fame class. There are 8 members enshrined, and one of them is outrageous. Former athletic director David Mullins. Quite frankly, David Mullins became the athletic director at ETSU because, well, it was the Peter Principle. They had had good athletic directors before he was there, but none of them really could work under then-President Paul Stanton, the president that dropped football and got ETSU kicked out of the Southern Conference and into the Atlantic Sun. So here comes the tennis coach. Hey, he'll take the pay raise. He'll be able to keep the job indefinitely, and he was there for 12 years. 12 horrible, awful years, where he proved to be the worst athletic director known to mankind. And I'm going to go through and just the bullet points of the David Mullins record here. But I did want to mention this. Scott Carter, the current athletic director, who worked under Mullins, and I think that's probably one of the reasons why Mullins is now in the Hall of Fame, which is now the ETSU Hall of Shame, simply because of his presence. But there was something called the Trailblazer Award, and it's going to be named after Tommy Woods and Johnny Russia. Tommy Woods was the first black basketball player at ETSU. Russia was the first black football player. They had to endure a lot. I did a feature once on Russia. Got to know him a little bit. Russia actually played in the 60s, and in a 1966 game against the Citadel down in Charleston, when he went out onto the field, he had a bucket of water dumped onto him, and he was very scared at that time. He thought initially, this is acid. That's really tough. Thankfully, it was not acid. But Russia, who actually had a bit of a pro tryout, if memory serves, and still to this day also is a punter, and actually has the record for most punts in an ETSU football game. He had 14 one time. So kind of an interesting athletic figure. The Trailblazer Award is going to be named after these two pioneers. Couldn't think of two better people to name it after them. The Trailblazer Award was created to recognize the historical accomplishments of an individual ETSU athletic member based on his or her athletic accomplishments, work in the community, region, and how they helped impact other generations of Buccaneers. Well, it sounds like a staff statement, and it is, and all this, but okay. Couldn't choose better people to name for the award than Woods and Russia. Unfortunately, to honor them supposedly, while you are then putting David Mullins into the Hall of Fame, is very insulting to Russia. Mullins was the AD who cut football, and we can say that's a presidential decision, but then all that does is say, oh, well, Mullins was just the henchman. You know, David Mullins actually cut football a month after he gave Paul Hamilton an extension to coach in a season that wouldn't exist. And then ETSU cried poor that they couldn't afford football anymore. The disingenuousness of that decision and saying how much football was going to cost. I remember at one point they tried to say, well, we're going to need new turf for the mini dome, and that's going to cost $1.5 million. $1.5 million. Turf doesn't cost that much. I remember in Sports Talk reporting that and say, turf doesn't cost this much. It didn't cost that much last time. It hasn't gone up that much. And all of a sudden, well, AstroTurf will cost anywhere from $750,000 to $1.5 million. Oh, really? Yeah. How much is this car going to cost me? Well, it'll cost you anywhere from $7,500 to $15,000. Would you like to sort of, uncover what it really costs for us? Well, could not believe some of the things David Mullins tried to get away with and succeeded in doing. Give you more. Look at the coaches that he hired. When he became the athletic director and he had to hire a basketball coach, ETSU was one of the most desirable jobs it will ever be. You had a turnkey team to go to the NCAA tournament, with everybody coming back from an NCAA tournament team that nearly defeated Wake Forest in the NCAAs. Now, 7 years before, ETSU was in the doldrums. They were 7-20, had only one eligible player, and yet Keener Fry, one of the good athletic directors before Mullins, was able to lure the following coaches to interview for the position. In addition to eventual hire at DeChillis, there was Buzz Peterson, Jeff Lebo, and Derek Wittenberg. All four of those coaches would go on to coach in major conferences. All four of them would coach in the NCAA tournament. Now, with a turnkey team, with Jimmy Patsos, who was at the time an assistant at the University of Maryland, who were the national champions, and Patsos was begging publicly for an interview. It never came. Here are the three coaches that Mullins was able to secure for one of the more desirable college basketball coaching jobs in the country. Murray Bartow, who turned out, he turned out to be okay in that he led the Buccaneers to more NCAA tournament appearances than any other coach in their history. But then again, he also was coaching in the remedial Atlantic Sun Conference. So, and he had DeChillis' players, to begin with. Followed up that NCAA tournament team that first year that Bartow inherited, if you will, was after 2003. At 2004, the Buccaneers make it under Bartow to the NCAA tournament. They lose to Cincinnati. But the next year they go 7-19 against Division I competition. That's quite... And then Mullins gave Bartow an extension. That was the thing about Mullins. He was never going to admit he made a mistake. I mentioned the other coaches. Let me get to this, okay? Remember the four really good coaches ETSU, when they were in the doldrums, that Fry was able to attract. DeChillis, Lebo, Wittenberg, and Peterson. The three were Murray Bartow, who had been out of coaching for a year. These are who Mullins was able to get to a turnkey NCAA tournament team, a program that should have been on their way to becoming a mid-major powerhouse back then. Bartow, Dean Keener, who would go on to be the coach at James Madison. Keener's record at James Madison, 31-85. Mark Sloanacre. Sloanacre only used the Buccaneers to get a new contract from Mercer. Sloanacre's career won-loss record as a coach, 129-213. Keener's winning percentage all-time, 267. Sloanacre's 377. Yeah, out of that three, Bartow's certainly the coach to go with. But those are the coaches that you could get for the Buccaneers in 2003? Quite frankly, Mullins really struggled hiring coaches. Lindsay Devine turned out to be a pretty good volleyball coach. What did she do? What was she doing before she came to ETSU as a volunteer assistant and eventually rose up to be the head coach? She was working with the JV team at Science Hill. Those were Mullins hires. What about Yazir Zattini? His hand-picked successor to him as tennis coach at ETSU. Oh yeah. Zattini stole $100,000 from the program. We're making David Mullins, the guy that hired Zattini, a Hall of Famer? Really? Really? They have put in the press release that these are what they put his accomplishments are, and they make it really at the end. It's one of those things where, we're going to sort of sneak him in. And this is what they say are his accomplishments. They speak of his record as a tennis coach. And he won 5 Southern Conference regular season titles and 5 tournament championships as tennis coach at ETSU. Now, if you're going to put him in for that, maybe. Also, the team did rather well academically. But as an athletic director, this is what they say. New venues for baseball, softball, and soccer and golf were constructed. Well, first of all, he had nothing to do with the golf facility. That was all Fred Warren. The next thing is all 3 of those facilities were built late. There was an embarrassment that first year of the baseball stadium. No stands to sit in, they bring in lawn chairs. Did that with the soccer stadium too. Softball stadium, baseball stadium was built a year late. In addition to being behind schedule, same thing with the softball stadium. The teams that would go into them, at least softball and baseball, never really got a hit off of those stadiums. You're supposed to start winning, when you have a new team come in, a new stadium, and all that. Softball instead had 10 straight losing seasons after they got their new yard. The real thing was building these venues and not a new arena, which the city so desperately needs for not only the basketball team, but to bring in concerts and minor pro sports and all that sort of stuff. The Tri-Cities really need it. That's what you should begin with. Instead, he's wasting money that could go to that project on softball fields. He's wasting money that could go to that project on $15 million of renovations to Freedom Hall, an obsolete arena. I mean, that's putting good money into bad into an old car when you need a new one. There was a time during the Mullins tenure where football, there was an attempt to bring it back in 2007. It failed. A big press conference to announce it. It would go to a student vote. The students didn't want it. They were going to raise the activities fees, and the students decided they didn't want the activities fees raised. But there was an announcement that this project and this campaign was going to come about. And I'll never forget, Paul Stanton, we've got 99 yards to go, we're going to get it done and all this, that was his speech. After the speech, a radio reporter went up to David Mullins and asked him about this project, this endeavor that ETSU was going to do to bring back football at ETSU. And I'll never forget his comment. He just went to the radio reporter and went, "People love this university." How does that relate to bringing back football? Right then you knew the project was going to be doomed. If that was the athletic director's answer to, so talk to us about this project. People love this university. Total propaganda. I don't even know what to say about that. I really don't. I do know that he was very dishonest to his own staff, and by that I mean Don Hellman, who at the time was his women's play-by-play announcer, women's basketball play-by-play announcer. Now, some of you won't remember this, but WXM, when they first started the all-sports format and the quote-unquote morning monster, Bobby Rader wasn't the original host of that show. It was actually Don Hellman. And Hellman at the time was also calling women's basketball play-by-play for ETSU, as I mentioned. And anyway, I have on David Mullins, for a weekly interview, this sort of thing. During the period of time ETSU was in the Atlantic Sun, which was the conference that Mullins could get ETSU in after the SoCon kicked him out for dropping football, there was a lot of unsatisfaction with the Atlantic Sun. So the Ohio Valley Conference actually extended an offer to bring back ETSU. I mean, ETSU had been an Ohio Valley Conference member from, I believe, 1957 to approximately 1977. So, that's some history there. But the problem was the football question was always going to be on the table if they were in the OVC if they were in the Atlantic Sun, which doesn't offer football. They were never going to have to answer that question. So the powers that be voted down the invite to return to the OVC. But there was a lot of buzz around, would they go or not? One day, Don Hellman asks him about, tell us a little bit about joining the OVC. What's, are you going to join? Or tell us what's the latest with that. And Mullins gave a long, drawn-out answer of nothing but mumbo-jumbo. Stuff you already know. Well, you have to look at the location of the various schools in the conference and blah, blah, blah. Just a nothing answer. That afternoon, ETSU was going to vote on whether or not they were going to join the OVC. Mullins never told Hellman that. Hellman asked the question. Mullins just dodged it. His own play-by-play broadcaster. That should tell you something about David Mullins right there. And it isn't good. But he had a lot of problems with the media, including me. And we're going to go with that here in just a little bit. But what really bothered me is that the media would let him get away with this stuff. For instance, 2007, he was always bragging on all sports trophies. You win in cross country, that's as good as winning the College World Series or something like that. No, I'm sorry, it isn't that way. Yet Mullins, the former tennis coach, would always brag on the all-sports trophies. Now, the Atlantic Sun Conference won the all-sports trophy there. But it's the remedial, English award. It's not that difficult to win. Those aren't really big-time schools. ETSU should be the all-sports champ in the Sun. First year they won that award, Mullins was telling everyone, this was about 2007, this was the greatest year in Buccaneers history. Really? There's no football. Men's basketball only made the NIT. They blew the A-Sun title game at home. Absolutely laid an egg. Then went to Columbus and got beat in the NIT. This was the greatest year in ETSU history. Baseball didn't do much. Why? This was better than 1969 when the Buccaneers won the Grantland Rice Bowl and the basketball team defeated number 9 Duke in Durham. Really? I've always been partial to 1996 in terms of Buccaneers athletics. 1996, the football team went to the Elite Eight of the Division I AA football playoffs. Farthest that they've ever gone in the football postseason. Won a playoff game against Villanova at the Mini Dome. But the golf program was ranked number 3 in the country, actually beat Tiger Woods' Stanford team in a competition. And although basketball was in the doldrums, they hired Ed Chillis as their head coach. To me, that's a pretty good year. But no, 2007, I can't even name one accomplishment outside of the basketball team going to the NIT that the Buccaneers had in 2007. But that was and the thing is, nobody challenged him on this. That really shortcoming the ETSU media. But he was a guy, Jay Santos once told me this, where one time during a broadcast, Santos says, matter-of-factly, ETSU is not executing very well right now. Mullins got on him for that. Honest commentary. Couldn't have that. This was the era where there was some guy in a sweater vest who, if you cheered too loud, was going to get on you. And it was horrible. He had a letter to fans he was going to write about every month on the ETSU website. Remember that? Lasted about, 3 months? After a while, people just said, he's not giving us anything, and an unpopular figure writing mumbo-jumbo just didn't work out. One of the things about Mullins, we go on and on, I am. The seating capacity of the Mini Dome, remember that? By the way, all you have to punch out two holes like garage doors on one side of the mini dome, maybe look at a sprinkler system, and you're going to be fire code complacent, I'm told. ETSU has never done this. Why? I don't know. Why you're willing to spend $15 million on Freedom Hall and not a fraction of that in the mini dome, I don't know. Well, I kind of do. It's easier to sell out 6,000 seat Freedom Hall than 12,000 seat Memorial Center. So that's the idea there. But the fact that you always have these seats locked up, the fact that you never ever get the necessary renovations, and this also is on Dr. Richard Sander and on Scott Carter as well. This is also on Brian Mullins. Why you wouldn't get that arena so that you could, if you want to use it, have a 12,000 seat venue? I don't know. Lee Morrow has talked about, if we did that, maybe we could get, say, the TSSAA football championships in Johnson City. They'd be indoors in December, guaranteed good weather. Why not? And you'd have 12,000 seats, more than enough for such a competition. Why don't you try to do this? Under Mullins, instead of keeping the mini dome with all the seats and into full seating capacities since it was created, Fire Marshal came in and said, how do you not grease the palms of the Fire Marshal? That's what I want. How do you let the Fire Marshal destroy your venue? I don't quite understand it. Fan support would go way down. Obviously, no football. Obviously, within the Atlantic Sun, if you look at the attendance from when Mullins got the job in basketball, slow decline. Of course, I mentioned kicked out of the Southern Conference. What about the cheerleader? Remember this? The cheerleader got a job at Hooters and then got kicked off the squad for working at Hooters. Really? Like, that's immoral. Being a waitress. Daisy Duke could not be a ETSU cheerleader, really. Daisy Duke can be the name of the beat writer's dog, but it can't be an ETSU cheerleader. No, that's out of the question. Wearing short Daisy Duke shorts, and that we can't have that. I mean, and that's all a Hooters girl is, a Hooters waitress is. Quite frankly, that was insulting to women. And yet, they upheld it. They kicked it, and the athletic director never came and said, hey, we can't do this. The country club sports were championed over the revenue sports. Remember when the U.S. softball team wanted to come to Johnson City and play ETSU? Oh, we can't do that. We don't have our softball stadium built yet. It's on the schedule. What happened? They played Milligan at Cardinal Park instead. That was an ETSU debacle. Remember when ETSU joined the Atlantic Sun and they got the AC Sun tournament in Johnson City for a couple of years? Played at the mini dome. And then they lost it. And I asked him about it, and he actually had the audacity to say this to David Mullins. This gives our fans an opportunity to go visit the other locations in the Southern Conference. Because, I've always wanted to see Macon in March. I mean, that's, really? Why do we play any home games then? Why not just allow our fans? Never mind what their budget is. I'm sure, that they can make all the kinds of expenditures they want to Nashville and Fort Myers, just the drop of a hat. Nobody has to work. Everyone has $1 million in the bank. I'm sure that's just absolutely the typical ETSU fan. Sure, David Mullins. This is who they just inducted into the Hall of Fame. And they actually had the audacity to say, well, these new facilities were always behind times. What really hurt, and I had personally animosity with David Mullins because I was very critical of the athletic department at the time in sports soccer. Had been a credentialed reporter before, and he would not credential me anymore. That was on orders of David Mullins. And they actually tried to say, well, give it back if you admit to some wrongdoing. I was not going to do that. they are, I was not the only journalist they did this to. Brian T. Smith wrote an Enterprise piece very critical and of the ETSU athletic administration at the time, and he did something in his Enterprise piece that I do think was unethical, because David Mullins, as long as Paul Stanton was going to be there, was going to be the AD. I mean, it was the Peter principle. Stanton was sick of hiring competent ADs that he'd have to replace every few years when they went to greener pastures, when he could have a tennis coach and just, be a henchman. So what happened then was Brian T. Smith did a big Enterprise story on ETSU athletics. This was about 15 years ago. And in it, he had written without any sources that Mullins' job was on the line. Well, it wasn't. After that, Mullins would not talk to Smith. Well, here's the problem with that. That's not your call. And all that does is give you less exposure than before. You might not like reporters, but that's not necessarily ethical. And amazingly, so much of the media around here is just extensions of the PR department. They never criticized it. Not to Smith, not to me. No one ever really stood up. When I'm critical, when I say to Jason Shea should be more transparent, I'm doing it for my media brethren. I never got that courtesy from my media brethren. That's the way it is. However, what Mullins did was unethical. And then, when I was a sports talk show host at WEMB, amazingly, I started getting credentialed again. When Mullins wasn't there anymore. All sorts of lies about my character were being told and why I wasn't credentialed. I still have to sometimes answer to them to this day. What I really find outrageous is that Scott Carter knows all this. When Scott Carter was a young athletic administrator, just starting out, ETSU just cut football, the program that he played on at ETSU. And Carter was there for a basketball game where some students brought some signs critical of ETSU's decision to drop football. Acting Gestapo, Mullins' administration saw that those signs were taken away. And those students, I suppose, had of stern talking to. One of the things is they sent Carter out to play henchman. And I really would have preferred, and I know in hindsight you can say, well, it might have cost him his career, but that should tell you what the environment was like and why you should not make Mullins a Hall of Famer, why he is a Hall of Shamer. If this was the case, Carter was then sent out to play henchman and suggested, I'll never forget this, to the students who had brought fans critical of ETSU for dropping football, why don't you bring signs that say, we love football? We love football to a basketball game. Really, Mr. Carter? You think that's appropriate? Neither is it appropriate to put David Mullins in the ETSU Hall of Fame. That selection should be reneged immediately. It is insulting to everyone else in the ETSU Hall of Fame that the biggest bum in ETSU athletics history is now called great. Disgraceful.